Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to the Carian Sovereignty Ash of War. This absolute beast was added in the newly released Elden Ring DLC, and in this video we're going to find out what makes these things so damn overpowered and where its limitations lie. You're going to follow along on my journey from the very start all the way to the final boss of the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion to see how it holds up. So without further ado, let's get going. Since we're starting this on a new character, we're gonna have to first get the Ash of War. For this, we have to access the Shadow Realm, which requires us to kill Radahn and Mohg. Along the way, we're gonna pick up multiple items and talismans, which will be important for later. But for now, our first goal will be to kill Radahn. So after acquiring Torrent at Gatefront, we can jump down to the beach behind the first steps out of Grace and pick up a gold pickled foulfoot. Coming back to Gatefront, we pick up the flail, ride up to Stormhill where we collect a golden seed and a stone sword key, and kill this rider nearby, giving us the golden vow Ash of War. We're gonna later apply this to a dagger, so when we cast it, we receive an 11.5% boost to our damage. Just around the corner, we pay a visit to Alexander, where we kindly ask him to let us borrow his talisman, which boosts our skill damage by 10%. Thankfully, he lets us take it without any further complications. Riding east to the third church of Marika, we collect the wondrous physic flask and our first sacred tear. Down south, we take the Royal House Scroll and bring it to Sorcerer Sellen to purchase the Carian Slasher sorcery, which will help us fight Radahn and Mohg. Additionally, we pick up another gold pickled foulfoot at the ruins. At Fort Height, we gather our next golden seed and obtain the left Dectus medallion, which we'll need later for access to Altus. Lastly, we head to Castle Morn down in Weeping Peninsula to obtain our main weapon, on which we'll use the Carian Sovereignty Ash of War later. On the way there, we pick up another sacred tear and golden seed before arriving at Castle Morn, where we secure the claymore. With that, we can now turn our attention to Caelid. To get there, we take the shortcut by triggering the teleportation chest in the Dragonburnt ruins, which transports us to Aeonia, where we'll find the Meteorite staff. With an S scaling and intelligence, it's the optimal staff to aid us in beating Radahn and Mohg. After resting at the Grace nearby, Melina takes us to Roundtable Hold, where we buy a dagger from the Twin Maiden Husk, on which we'll put the Golden Vow Ash of War from earlier. Our next stop is Fort Ferreth, which holds the right Dectus medallion and Radagon Sword Seal, which increases our stats at the cost of more damage. Furthermore, we can kill the sleeping dragon here with the flail we picked up earlier for some early runes. Since the flail inflicts bleed, this isn't a huge process, as the bleed procs do percentage-based damage. Right when the dragon dies, we pop one of our gold pickled foulfoots, which boosts the runes to a total of 96,500. While we're at it, we might as well get some more runes by making the Knight's Cavalry and Dragon Barrow jump into the void. By going on the ledge here and waiting for it to trigger its jump attack, you can do this pretty easily. The total of 138,000 runes we got from both the dragon and the Knight's Cavalry are put into intelligence, getting us to level 40. Since the Claymore isn't a legendary weapon, it needs normal smithing stones for upgrades. To be exact, we'll need 12 of each smithing stones to fully upgrade it. That's why we already pick up the required smithing stone 1 and smithing stones 2 in Limgrave. We'll come back to picking up more of them further along the run. Our last destination before fighting Radahn is Liurnia. And you already know the deal by now. After picking up another sacred tear, we ride to the Glintstone Dragon's Marag, from whom we steal the Academy Glintstone Key. But before entering the Academy, we take a quick detour to the Carian Study Hall, where we obtain the Carian Glintstone Staff. This thing has a passive boost that increases our Carian Slicer damage, from which we profit even when it's in our offhand. We then ride around whole Liurnia, picking up smithing stones number 2 and 3, which gets our claymore to level 9. Finally, we enter the Academy, where we quickly take care of the Red Wolf of Radagon and pick up a few items, one of them being the Glintstone Wetblade, which will later allow us to use the magic affinity with the claymore, so the Carian Sovereignty damage scales off of intelligence. Going further into the Academy grounds, we come across this crab that drops us the Twin Sage Glintstone Crown, which raises our intelligence by 6 points at the cost of HP and stamina. So that's everything done in Liurnia. Now for Radahn. To activate the Redmane Festival, we have to activate a Grace in Altus. While we're here, we pick up a few items for later. 1 golden seed, this Ember Starlight, which will be important for the quest later, and 2 more golden seeds beyond the outer wall. On our way to Redmane Castle, we pick up 1 last golden seed before we finally arrive at our final destination to face Radahn. And with that, let the festival begin. In spite of the many preparations, taking down Radahn was still quite a challenge. Simply put, we were a bit underleveled. So after dying countless times, I went and got the Rock Sling, which is boosted by the Meteorite Staff. If you don't notice, Radahn seems to have a weak spot for the sorcery, and it's also just a nice way of dealing damage at a distance. Not to underestimate the Carian Slicer, which also performs greatly of course. After multiple tries, I was then finally able to take Radahn down, giving us Radahn's Great Rune and 91,000 runes, which are put into intelligence. With Radahn down, we can now focus on Mohg. By receiving our first Great Rune, we trigger Vare's quest to continue, which will get us to Mohg Palace. But before doing so, we once again scavenge the map for smithing stones, this time for 4s and 5s, getting our claymore to level 15. At the Rose Church, we then talk to Vare, where he instructs us to go and invade some players. After doing so by nakedly killing this blasphemous blade user with a level 0 dagger, we return to him where he gives us our next task, to soak this cloth in a maiden's blood. This can be done at the Church of Inhibition, and upon coming back, he rewards us with the Pure Blood Knight's medal, granting us access to Mohg Palace. For Mohg, only minimal preparation is needed. The first two items we get are the Purifying Crystal and Magic Shrouding Cracktear. The first allows us to survive Mohg's phase transition, and the second boosts our magic damage by 20%. To get the Purifying Crystal tier, we must follow Yura's questline until we get invaded by Eleonora at the Second Church of America. After taking her down, we can move to Northeast Liurnia, where we kill the Erdtree avatar to get the Magic Shrouding Cracktear. Then, we quickly head back to Limgrave to kill Bernal, which rewards us with his armor. As we're still only level 50, which is not nearly enough to fight Mohg, we acquire some runes by making the bird here fall off a couple of times. And just like that, we're now ready to fight Mohg, our last obstacle between us and the Carian Sovereign, the Ash of War. Fighting him was rather straightforward, as there really wasn't much we could do rather than to just try until we got him. And that's what I did. By drinking our flask and casting Golden Vow, I was able to do some good early damage with the Rock Sling spell, and the quick handling of the Carian Slicer spell was performing good as well. We were really just still under leveled, as the damage output wasn't too great, but trust me when I say that won't be a problem going forward. So after many more tries, I was able to take him down, finally giving us access to the Shadow Realm, and with that, the Carian Sovereign, the Ash of War. By touching Miquella's hand at the cocoon, we get transported to the Shadow Realm, and although the Carian Sovereign, the Ash of War is quite far into the map, we can get there without defeating a single boss. Normally, you would have to fight Rellana, but by taking the Spirit Springs at Fort Reprimand, we can skip her. By then traversing through the secret tunnel at Morth Ruins, we come up in the Bunny Village, where we ride further east along the mountain. Once we arrive at the top, we cross the field to descend this path, revealing a small cave at the end of it. Inside, there's a scarab that drops the Carian Sovereign, the Ash of War. Now that we have acquired the Ash of War, let me give you a quick overview of it. Once initiated, the Ash of War transforms our blade into this magical greatsword, which deals full magic damage. The thing can be charged up to 2 levels, the higher one dealing more damage but being slower. The first attack is this overhead slash, which can be followed up by a quicker horizontal slash, both dealing enormous amounts of damage. When using it on a greatsword, we even get quite a lot of hyper armor, stopping us from getting interrupted by lighter attacks, which is why we already got the claymore. Another thing about the Ash of War is that it deals huge stance damage, but more on that later. We'll return later to the DLC, but for now, we just apply the Ash of War to the claymore with the magic affinity, making it scale with intelligence. Since we now have the Ash of War, we can proceed with our original mission of defeating the game with it. And where do we start? Well, all the way at the beginning, taking on Margit. The only buffs we actually use here are our flask, containing only the Magic Shroud and Cracktear, the Golden Vow Ash of War, and the Warrior Jar Shard as a talisman. And what do you know, we actually managed to kill him in one combo. Yes, that's how strong this Ash of War is. Killing Margit rewards us with a talisman pouch and access to Stormvale Castle, but before moving on to Godric, we grab some more buffs. First, the Magic Scorpion Charm. Remember the Amber Starlight we picked up earlier? Well, here's where it comes to use. At a certain point in Celivis's questline, he asks us to find the Amber Starlight we already have, and upon giving it to him, he rewards us with the Magic Scorpion Charm. When equipped, this thing gives us an additional boost of 12% magic damage. Second, we get the Terra Magica spell by completing the Academy Crystal Cave dungeon in Liurnia. When cast, the spell creates a little area in which we'll receive another 22.5% boost to our magic damage. With that, we're more than prepared to take on Godric. The real challenge here was trying to stay in the Terra Magica range, not to lose the buff. but the damage again was astonishing. The first combo triggered his phase transition immediately, where I was even able to get off another hit before the cutscene played. Coming into the second phase, he was just one hit away from dying, and so I ran up to him to deliver the final blow, getting us another great rune. Next up on our list is the Draconic Tree Sentinel, who's guarding the entrance to the capital. Since he doesn't have a typical boss arena with a fog gate, we can sneak up on him, allowing us to get off a free combo without being punished. I also forgot to put on the Glintstone crown up until now, but hey, here it is. So, Flask, Golden Vow, and Terra Magica right behind him. And what do you know, we actually get a stagger with one combo, giving us just enough time to charge the second attack and take him down. And that's it. Just phenomenal. Since we have one more talisman slot free, the only thing reasonable to do is to get another talisman. And so we get the Godfrey icon by taking down Godfroy, the Grafted in the Golden Lineage Evergale. This thing boosts attacks which are charged up by 15%, and since the Carian Sovereignty Ash of War falls into that category, we benefit from it. While we're at it, we also collect the remaining smithing stones to max our claymore. First 6s, 7s and 8s for level 24, and lastly the Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone in this tower in the DLC for the final 25th level. Godfrey the Piss Ghost in Langdale is next. Once I saw how much damage I was dealing, I realized I could probably take him down in a single combo, just like with Margit. But his fast attack pattern meant there was barely a chance to fully charge an attack mid-fight. To make it work, I had to hit a tight window on his opening. After dodging his jump attack, I had only a split second to start charging the attack before his next move would interrupt me, and trust me, the timing was insanely tight. After failing multiple times, I finally pulled it off, and with that, checking another boss off of our list. For Morgod, we had a rather, let's say, unclean fight. I could have easily restarted to read his openings more, but I just went with the first try. The problem was that I had to again search for an opening in a tight attack pattern, which made some of my buffs run out. Once I finally found an opening, the damage was still great, but I bet that I would have maybe even been able to get another one combo kill if I put in the work. Regardless, Morgott went down in a breeze. With that, we now have access to the mountaintops, setting our next target on the Fire Giant. The Fire Giant is a single boss with the most HP in the base game. Coming right after Morgott, he has quadrupled the HP of him. For that, some more preparations are needed. To fill the second tier slot in our flask, we get the Stonebarb Crack tier by killing this putrid avatar in Caelid. What this thing does is that it boosts the stance damage dealt by 30% for 30 seconds. If you hit both attacks of the Carian Sovereignty Ash of War, the normal stance damage already is 93. Adding 30% to that takes us to 121, and taking into consideration that many bosses lay right at the 120 mark of stance, we can stance break those bosses just in one combo if we manage to pull it off. But as you'll see later in the video, doing so isn't as easy as it sounds. We also get the Ritual Sword Talisman from the Lux Runes in Altus. It boosts our damage by 10% if we are at maximum HP, which I thought was going to be really useful, but as you'll see later, I wasn't even able to stay at full HP a lot of the time. With those items, we can now get going and traverse towards the Fire Giant by taking the Grand Left of Roll and riding all across the mountaintops of the giants until we reach the Fire Giant. As already mentioned, the Fire Giant has the most HP of all the bosses in the main game, and if you've ever fought him, you know that it's a constant game of chasing him after he rolls away, hitting him a couple of times and repeating the process. And so again, some of my buffs ran out along the way. Combining that with the fact that it takes a long time to charge the Ash of War, it just generally isn't the optimal fight for it. Still, I managed to get him down quite fast, especially in the second phase, because the damage was still great for Fire Giant standards. By killing him, we are now able to burn down the Erdtree with Melina, and with that get transported to Fair Missoula, getting us closer to defeating the game. In Fair Missoula, there are two bosses we must defeat, the Guskin Duo and Malekith. The Guskin Duo was a chaotic fight as I had to deal with two enemies at the same time. What helped though was the second horizontal slash of the Ash of War, which sometimes hit both the Apostle and the Noble at the same time. What I tried was to hide behind the pillars, charging up the attack as they were walking up to me. The follow-up then went through the pillars, hitting whatever was near it. I could have also used sleep pots here to have them stay still, but I decided not to. Ultimately, I took them down in a timely manner, clearing the path forward to Malekith. Fighting Malekith required a bit of strategy though. At the start, I realized he always runs up to you, attacking with one of his opening moves. If you did a stone throw, I was able to charge a full attack, which would throw him into phase 2 immediately. so it was just a bit of RNG, hoping for the right attack, and because I was standing in the Terra Magica range, the damage was astonishing. With that, I had a pretty consistent phase 2 trigger as I was able to pull this off a lot. In phase 2 though, I was really just dodging until an opening occurred where I charged the attack and either he interrupted me, killed me, or the attack went through. So after just trying many more times, I eventually got him, leaving only Gideon, Godfrey, and the Radahn Beast for the main game. But instead of finishing up the main game now, we're gonna leave it for later and head to the Shadow Realm now. To get stronger in the Shadow Realm, we have to collect Scatter Tree fragments which are scattered all across the map. Some are found early on, others later. Before fighting our first boss, we already pick up 21 of them, progressing us to Scatter level 10 out of 20. The first boss we fight will be Gaius. This mainly for the reason that he quickly gives us access to another 5 fragments. But although we were Scatter level 10 already, he was still kicking our butt hard. Not only was it the damage which is tremendous, all of his attacks were also able to cancel our attack. Before, we had enough hyper armor when charging on attack to not get interrupted by most bosses' attacks. I realized quickly that our current constellation wasn't going to work for Gaius and that I had to come up with a better strategy. And so I decided to go and get a bit tanky so we could take the attacks without dying nor getting interrupted. The first thing we set our eyes on is Mohg's armor. After telling him to remain sad forever, we can find the armor on his corpse near the Church of the Crusade. And although we're gonna be heavyweight with this, it's still gonna help a lot. The next item we get is the Dragon Crest Shield Talisman, which reduces our physical damage taken by 10%, and by advancing Bogart's quest, we unlock the ability to buy Boiled Crab from him. When consumed, they give us another 20% physical damage negation for 60 seconds. And after activating Radahn's Great Rune at his Divine Tower, the last and most crucial item we get for our strategy is the Iron Jar Aromatic. To craft it, we need the Perfumer's Cookbook number 3. When we drink the aromatic, it literally turns our body into steel for 40 seconds. What this means is that we get even more damage negation and poise. And although that sounds great, we should really only use it when it's unavoidable, as these things are a pain to farm. To craft them, we need 5 living jar shards, which are dropped only at a 20% rate from the big jars and a 5% rate from the small ones. So let me break down to you all the buffs that play for Gaius. In our 4 talisman slots, we have the Warrior Char Shard, the Magic Scorpion Charm, the Godfrey Icon, and the Dragon Crest Shield Talisman. In front of the Fog Gate, we pop a Rune Arc, eat a boiled crab, and drink the aromatic. After entering the arena, we continue with Golden Vow, our Wondrous Physic Flask, Terra Magica, and drinking 1 FP flask so we're full again. The idea here is to get a stance break as soon as possible. With the Stonebarb Crack Deer, we can get that in one combo because Gaius sits right at 120 poise. So while he stands broken, we charge up another attack of which we only land the first hit as we get interrupted in the follow-up. Once he jumps up into the air, we have to dodge a spinning move to charge another attack of which we land both the first and the follow-up. Just like that, he's a blow away from dying and we finish him off with a regular Claymore attack. With that, we can collect 5 more Scatter Tree fragments at the peak here, getting us to Scatter level 12. Next up is the Dancing Lion. Once again, we're dealing with a boss that has 120 stance, meaning we can stance break in one combo. This time though, we don't need the tanky armor and aromatic. There are a few attacks which allow for a full charge punishment attack, one of them being the stand-up attack. I didn't follow an exact strategy for the fight, but rather just went in and dodged until I found one of the punishable attacks. If I did, the full combo already halved his health. While his stance was broken, I then charged another attack on which I was only able to land the first swing. Finally, I gave him the last blow, checking another boss off the list. Before heading for Mesmer, we once again find ourselves acquiring more items to improve our strategies. First off is the Rakshasa armor set, which grants 2% additional damage increase per armor piece, meaning 8% in total. We get it by going down the secret path in the Shadow Keep, eventually bringing us to the Rakshasa boss, from which we receive the armor once we kill him. Another thing I wanted to try was to use Endure to tank specific attacks. By buying another dagger from Patches and applying the Endure Ash of 4 on it, we have it at our disposal with just a quick weapon switch. What Endure does is that it makes you almost invincible for a few short seconds after you use it. This just allows us to specifically tank certain attacks whilst already charging up our Carian sovereignty. Especially when going for Mesmer, this was very useful as I didn't have to dodge his opening move, which he by the way performs in the second phase as well. By using Endure, I could charge up my attack whilst also taking only minimal damage from the explosion. Since Mesmer also sits at 120 stance, the first combo broke him immediately, allowing me to send him into phase 2 just after. As already said, he performs the same opening in the second phase, which meant that we could just repeat the same procedure from before, this time even taking him down in the first combo. With that, we now have the Mesmer's Kindling allowing us to burn the Sealing Tree. The last boss in the way of us doing so is Romina, Saint of the Bud. Before fighting her though, we once again traverse the map to pick up some of the remaining Scatter Tree fragments, bringing us all the way to level 15. To fight Romina, we again use the Rakshasa armor, the Endure dagger, and our usual buffs. One full combo, half her health bar and broke her stance already, and the more attempts, the better I got at reading her attacks. The second phase was way more challenging though, as she flies around a lot and makes her butterflies explode. On the attempt where I killed her, I managed to delay her phase transition to about a quarter of the health bar. This meant that I just needed one more hit in phase 2, which after dodging around cluelessly, I managed to eventually land, freeing the way to the Sealing Tree. Once burned down, access to Enir Elim is granted. Just like that, we were already getting close to finishing the DLC. Before continuing though, we were gonna pay a visit to R'hllana the Twin Moon Knight to see how the Carian sovereignty holds up to its original wielder. Although we had to wear our heavy armor again, as she's quite the hard hitter, we still managed to take her down with ease. The process was just as with any boss we've beaten so far. Again, we're dealing with 120 stance, so after tanking the opening hits and landing our attack, she breaks down, allowing us to take the critical hit. Once she gets up, she starts her phase transition, which gives us time to charge our final attack, taking her down. Next would be Consort Radahn, but as he seems like much more of a challenge than the Elden Beast, we're gonna save him for the finale and finish up the main game now. Gideon is first, and for him, I don't even want to say too much, just see for yourself what I did to him. Poor guy couldn't even finish his speech before getting obliterated. With Gideon out of the way, we can move on to Godfrey the First Elden Lord, and oh boy, this was a tough one. In the start, I tried to get by with just using the Endure dagger for many attempts, but the attacks were just dealing too much damage and broke me out of my attack constantly. I eventually decided to go back to my tank build, which I used on Gaius. To complement it, I even got the Bull Goat Talisman that raises our poise, making us able to withstand more attacks. To make space, I removed the Dragon Crest Shield Talisman. Since I needed more Iron Jar aromatics, I also had to get back to farming living jar shards, which was time consuming. Luckily, I didn't have to farm many aromatics, as I then just got him after 2 tries. Right at the start, I ran towards him while applying my buffs and putting down Terra Magica. Since I wanted the aromatic to last for as long as possible, it was the last buff I applied. Once he started his attack, I started mine, and as I was now able to tank the hits, the stance break followed shortly after. Whilst on his knees, I gave him another blow, sending him into phase 2, which was all the more challenging. Right at the start, he grabbed me twice, which wasted a lot of my aromatic time, resulting in it to run out after hitting another combo. As he was now very low, I finished him off with a non-charged attack just in time before he would have hit me. Overall, this was a very challenging boss to say the least. Just a few steps further lies the last boss from the main game, the Radahn Beast. As we're dealing with 2 whole health bars, we even had to allocate more FP flasks to get through. Surprisingly, Radahn took a lot of damage from our attacks, with one single hit taking about a third of his health bar away already. If I was lucky enough to pull through a full attack, the fight was basically over, as he got staggered, which gave me enough time to charge the last attack. The Elden Beast though was a whole other story. He had constantly swimming away, and my buffs ran out, which just dragged the fight. It wasn't even a necessarily hard fight, as I just had to run after it and charge my attack, dodging a few of his along the way. Luckily, they added in the ability to bring out Torn during the fight, making it a bit more bearable. But yeah, after endless chasing, I eventually got it, which lets us put a big checkmark on the main game, as we can now put our eyes on the last boss in the DLC, Consort Radahn. If you've ever fought him before, you know he's a hard hitter, so to be prepared to the fullest, we collect the remaining Scatter Tree fragments. Most of them are pretty easy to get, whilst others are for example dropped by these hippos, found all across the Shadow Realm. In total, the remaining ones take us to Scatter level 20, which is the final level. Before we go into the fight, I want to give you one last overview of all the buffs we use. As for talismans, we still have the Warrior Jar Shard, Magic Scorpion Charm, Godfrey Icon, and the Bull Goat Talisman. In front of the Fog Gate, we pop a Boiled Crab and cast Golden Vow. Once in the arena is Terra Magica and our Wondrous Physic Flask. After multiple failed attempts, I started developing a quite consistent strategy, and it goes as follows. To start, he always does a spinning attack. Right after dodging that, we charge up our first attack, and as he's also 120 stance, we stance break him. Now what's really important here is that I take the critical attack. For one, it's just enough damage for it to initiate his second phase, but what I didn't know before was that apparently if you phase changes through the critical attack, you don't actually get spawned right next to him at the start of phase 2. This gives us enough time to heal up before we run towards him again. He then starts his AoE attack, and another thing I didn't know was that the sphere of this attack centers on us, the player. And because we're still a great distance from him, Radahn himself is outside of the sphere. This allows us to charge a full attack right next to him whilst he's still in the air. This once again stance breaks him, and after we take the critical hit, he jumps up to space just to come down some moments later as a burning meteorite. To survive the attack, we use the Endure Dagger right before the impact and heal up after it. One last combo is then enough to give him the last blow, and with that, giving an end to our journey and a mission to defeat Elden Ring with the Carian from the Ash of War. I think that shows how good this Ash of War is pretty well. In terms of pure damage, I can't name another Ash of War that comes close to it. Also, the stance aspect is just phenomenal. You shouldn't be able to stance break a boss this fast. It's an impressive hard hitter, but its long charge up time sometimes makes it difficult to use against fast bosses. Now keep in mind that we just tested it on against bosses, and didn't even touch on how it performs in general exploration, like clearing dungeons. Especially when there's a group of enemies, the horizontal slash can work wonders. If you've stuck around all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, a like and a subscribe is appreciated. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.